So welcome to a brand new series of Spiritual Gangster Podcast. So this afternoon, got an amazing guest. He's former Royal Marine Commando, former UK member of Special Forces, coach, and an all-round good dude. I just want to welcome to the series and to the show, Si Jeffries. How you doing, mate?
Thanks, Chris. Thank you for having me on. Pleasure.
Brilliant. So I always like to ask that one question, and a lot of people have kind of given very strange, answers, quite varied, short, long. But who is Si Jeffries?
Business owner, coach, helping other people to remove limitations, essentially find that happiness and satisfaction in life.
Yeah.
And like me personally, well, this is going to segue into loads of different things, but like defining me as a person, someone who I find that I'm at my best when I have a strong purpose. So something big to drive towards, which is probably why that I listed that coach. And I guess what I do, because it's what I do with most of my time. And so a lot of my life is formed around that because it's what gives me purpose, and I find a lot of happiness and satisfaction from that. And then outside of it, I guess how I spend my time is it's a lot around health, fitness, adventure. Like those are another, I guess, core parts of my personality. And friends and family, I've always been a big believer in having a sort of powerful support network and cultivating strong relationships. So that ties into it as well. That's really good. I have to go away and think about that question because it's such a massive question.
It usually, what it does, I find.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you
how you answer it. Yeah, go on.
I kind of break it down because what it does is it kind of puts people on the spot, and everybody gets stumped by this question. Because usually when you go in a podcast, you straight away, tell us a bit about your background, and obviously for yourself, you'll go through your journey. And I think really a lot of times, some people attach those labels, don't we? So, former Roman Commando, former UK Special Forces. What are you going to then put yourself in which category? And that's, I think a lot of times, like myself, I would say I'm human. I love adventure. Could I put myself down as an author? Could be a podcaster, a father, a husband. It's kind of like looking at these parts. People's answer to that will often define the way they place themselves in society, because this is one of the core reasons for starting this, because it's about seeking truths. Because I find, and you may agree on this one, that a lot of people, and I've kind of, when I see these like clips when Special Forces guys are being interviewed, they tend to ask the same questions, and it's kind of like, right, you've got Special Forces units, and it's always about sensationalizing something or using that core question. And I know something me and you have actually spoken out quite, a few times, questions such as how many people you killed? Well, how about how many people did you save? And it's kind of like bringing these questions, and obviously I've served, and you kind of see that from other people's point of view who've never been in that environment, and it's always to ask that question, well, who are you? Where do you place yourself in society?
Yeah, I think it's a hard question to answer because it's so expansive and you can answer it in so many different ways. And so it massively throws you off. I tell you why it throws you off, because you're like, fuck me, how do I even start? Like, it's almost too big it is too big. Like you can't, like, you'd have to sit down. To me, that question requires days and days and thinking about to really dig deep enough to answer it properly and then come up with something that's kind of coherent. And I think that's why it's hard and so thrown, because it's too big. It's so massive that your brain goes into, I don't how unless I think some people who are really, I guess if you have an incredible level of self-awareness and have thought about that stuff a lot, then it perhaps becomes easier. So your brain just serves up the very, I guess, the surface level. And the first thing is, well, what we do,
Yeah.
And I guess it's also subjective because it's different. With someone was talking about this in Israel, for example, whereas in the UK, someone asks something about you or what you do, people automatically answer with work. If you get asked that question in Israel, so it's an Israeli guy, they'll just talk about hobbies and pastimes and what they do with their family because they just interpret it in a different way. So I guess it's how you interpret it. I mean, for me, it definitely, because, like I said, it always, for me, what I've done is something that I've always been passionate about and I've gained, it's from that a lot of my purpose has been formed. I like having something at the center that's what I drive towards. So the military was previously, and now it's T&E, a coaching business, because from that I derive a huge amount of happiness and satisfaction, like I said. So it is, because you can sometimes, people will look at it and say, oh, you shouldn't let your work define you. But I think it really depends what that work is and how you feel about it, whether it's, so it's very subjective.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's something that I've asked myself multiple times. Obviously, work, and you go to work and you do your time, you leave home and you kind of put that into that box, put it to one side for the day. But I think a lot of times we kind of define ourselves through what we do as work, because that is what takes up one of the largest percentage of your time. So you've kind of got to go, wait, what do I want to do? I don't think I've ever worked in a job since leaving the military that I look at and I think I enjoy as much as the military, because it's not a job, is it? It's that lifestyle. You kind of go, great. I mean, I've got people that are speaking on, say, oh, I've got this really great, like some of the executives, oh, we're going to do this clipper. It's coming down, get on the boat, you tour around that. And I'm thinking, my brain almost switches at, well, have you ever lived on an aircraft carrier? Have you ever been in a helo? Have you ever done these experiences, like for myself and yourself, the experiences we've had and how you hear from other people and the way they view something. So their view of job is going to be completely different. When you've done something that's extreme, obviously your job, when you look at that aspect, you're then going to be speaking to other people that have not lived that extreme life. So it's kind of like it brings it right down, doesn't it? It kind of brings it right down to that ground level. And like myself, I would say, like for myself, I look at it as my job. What do I want to do as a job? And I ask myself this so many times, and you've got it quite defined in that way, that you're passionate about obviously helping other people, seeing them succeed, because you've like drawn all those previous experiences and putting in this. But if you were to get like 10 people in a room and ask them, go around every single one of them and say, who is, John Smith, who is this person, who is that person? I think everyone's going to come back to that same expression of what you did. Good question, like, who am I, on it?
I think that's the reason you just answered really why I started the Natural Edge, because exactly as you, I didn't see the military as a job, and so I wanted the same afterwards. I didn't want to expect to still got, that essentially I finished the military when I was early 30s. So that's only really, hopefully, a third of my life. Still got 2/3 left. Yeah. And I don't want that to be the only part where I felt like that. And that was one of the reasons when I left, is like, I'm going to leave proactively and start something and find that new, whatever's that new something, to replace that, to ensure that, because you're right, we do it for so, and there's no right or wrong. A lot of people get jobs that, some people, they have to get certain jobs because of whatever situations, and you get other people who they see their job as a way to pay the bills. Not great, it's not terrible, it's fine, but then they have lots of other things outside of it that it enables them to do, time with family, hobbies, sports, etc. For me, that's just not the way that I'm wired. That wouldn't be enough. I need something. If I'm going to be spending a lot of time doing something, then it needs to be something I really care about. And I was willing to go through a long period of, I guess, hardship and things going wrong to find that and get to the point where I am on that path, and it's working, because I was like, well, I've got years and years of work left. I want it to be something that I have that same feeling as I did about the military.
Yeah, absolutely. Because some of the conversation, and you might know her from Stevie Burns. He basically said to me, he got to 27 years old. He'd obviously Royal Marine Commando, SBS, Military Cross, and it just hit this point of like, what do I do in my life now? Like I've hit the pinnacle of what I can achieve because you're doing this stepping stone up to this peak almost, isn't it? It's like, and that's at a young age, at 27 years old, and like you said, like when you still got another 2/3. And I think that a lot of times people do kind of either chase something after they leave, they're looking for this to replace it, or another job. Is it very, do they get satisfied by doing it, or they'll go and do like circuit close protection, they'll do something that's closely linked, or they'll work around other people like other that are just military. And I think very much that when you from a young age to obviously as years go by, I think a lot of people that we speak to and being in that circle, it's like, what is a normal life once you've done that? And it is just seen, it's just kind of like a lifestyle, isn't it? From your own personal experience, from way the journey you've been to, and then the people you're coaching, say for
Okay.
example, they've done school, they've done university, they've got that job, they've gone down there and they're creating that career path, but they've obviously gone two separate pathways. Do you see, obviously, when you're coaching them, the kind of things they're stuck on, or the areas that they kind of got those questions about? Do you find that your own personal experience, you can take a lot from that and then see it from a different perspective from theirs, because their journey is completely different? If you look at our paths, the way we've gone and the way that they've gone, because their path seems to be more of a perceived way of life, isn't it? That people see that you've got to do this and then this and then this, through life.
I actually find, I think it's no different.
Yeah.
So the problems that I see coaching people are universal, and I get a lot of people. It's no different the problems I see with ex-military or public services to people who have gone through a civilian path. And it's actually like all the work we do is really based on psychology and neuroscience as opposed to the background. I think what people miss is people assume that if people have been in the military, they automatically have mental toughness or resilience. And it is true in a narrow spectrum of things. It doesn't translate across the board. And you see the same with assuming like Olympic athletes or business people. But I mean, you'll know for yourself the amount of people in the military, all those elite athletes and stuff, whose personal lives are falling to pieces.
Yeah.
They're shit outside of that job. The reason people are good at what they do in the military is they join it because it speaks their identity. So they go through a process of doing hard things, but actually those hard things aren't that hard for those people. So all the hard stuff that I did in the military, yes, it was physically hard, but it was easy because it was just what I wanted to do. So, and people they mistake that as this kind of extra strength these people have. No, they're just aligned. They're doing something that aligns with who they are. Therefore, the discomfort they go through, they're willing to put themselves through it. And because there's like a clear path, it clearly aligns with their values and who they are. But then take that same person. I know so many people in the military got a massive fear about going outside. Like the thought of leaving that safety bubble and going outside is more uncomfortable. Like doing things in civilian world feels more uncomfortable than operations in Afghan. And it's because they're then having to do things that are outside that identity and alignment, and they don't have the skills to deal with it. So it doesn't really matter what path people have been on. Everyone has similar problems because the human condition is the same. It's understanding that basically psychology, how the human brain works, how we as humans behave, and getting people to take those tools and do enough introspective work to figure out where their blocks and their problems are, and then change it. So the military background could be useful for bringing examples to life and the kind of time that I worked in London, but really, as you'll know, the core of it is understanding psychology. And this attributing kind of, like I said, mental toughness or resilience by default to people in the military or public services it's true, but narrow spectrum. It's not universal. And people need to, that's kind of a really key understanding of what we're trying to do. What we try to do with people is build a solid foundation that is universal. So no matter what happens in life, you can take it and roll with it. Because you don't, if you think back to your time in the military, you don't get taught anything on mindset. It comes as a default from the experiences you go through. So you learn certain things because you it's just progressive inoculation. It's just a process. Anyone can do that job in the military. As long as it aligns, yes, of course, you have to have base physical standards, but outside of that, as long as you find alignment with what you're doing, then you can get through it. And it's very progressive. You know, you don't go from day one to jumping straight into Afghanistan. It's just a progressive process. And it's those small steps, you know, same with athletes. There's a long journey of progressive steps to get to the place where they can do those amazing things. And the only reason they stick on that journey is because it aligns with their identity.
Absolutely, because that's something that I this is something that I've broken myself down for the last probably 5 to 7 years. I've broken down every part and I've gone, okay, then I like this, I'm passionate about this, or this aligns with myself. And I think a lot of people, and it's exactly what you said there, because people often see, you know, special forces units, maybe it's just this whole part of like Instagram and the cool edits and, you know, seeing the helos and doing the night vision goggles and all this and all that. But essentially, and this is something I know you're very obviously passionate about, but the basics, because essentially the core skills of like any special force unit is doing the basics well, isn't it? It's like, and this is what people need to kind of build that foundation well, because you can't have a strong house without, you know, a strong foundation. So you have to do those basics. And I think that's what people have to, but it's all these basics that align, because they've got to have that common goal at the end of it and go, okay, this is the process that I want to, this is where I need to be. But it's putting those steps in, isn't it? And it's the same as like any special force unit. It's those basics every single day, basic drills, basic, you know, process to get them there, because then that becomes easy, like I said.
Yeah, it is the basics done well. That's at the foundation, or sits at the foundation of any kind of high level performance. Without that, everything on top of it falls apart.
Absolutely. Some question, because obviously, like with sales, obviously we follow each other, obviously a couple of platforms, but with yourself, I see this very key part, and it's something that obviously you spoke about today about getting in your head. You can obviously your failures, you know, and I think that's something that's quite a key or core area, isn't it, of humanity, really, because it's straight away, oh, if you haven't done that, it's like that's a failure, or this is a failure. But do you find that's a kind of the language, because it's about reframing that language, isn't it? Or like reframing the mind. The people are quite easy to see something if, you know, if you've got to do 10 tasks, but they've failed 9, one of them, but they've got success, they see that as a failure.
I think it's the human predication to negative bias, which was really helpful through evolution. But now it really hinders us. So I see it all the time with the coaching, and we all do it. How many times you have a really good day and then one thing goes wrong, and that's what you hold on to, or that's what you're thinking about at the end of the day. And so being able to recognize that, and it's balancing it out. What we're trying to do is find perspectives of the middle ground, because it's detrimental to be overly negative, but it's also not helpful to be overly positive. So we're trying to find the truth, like the perspective. So in that scenario, it's okay, yeah, this one bad thing happened, but all this other good stuff happened. So on balance, it's been a good day. But often people let their thoughts and emotions take over. So rather than being able to step back and bring some truth to what they're feeling, they let the emotional side win out, and so they just dwell on the negative side. And there's probably a separate answer to it in, as you say, how we frame failure, because often people see success and failure as 2 separate paths, when in reality it is one and the same. And you cannot, the more success you want, the more you have to fail. And we see this all the time. We see successful people talking about this, and yet we don't often apply it to ourselves in our own lives. And this comes back to again, the core skill of, or the approach of treating mindset like a skill set, which is a lot of what I do with the coaching, and probably the thing that I see missing in this sort of mindset side of the wellness arena.
Yeah, definitely. Because that's something, because I know we spoke obviously earlier on, and it is, as you said yourself, it's a saturated market with coaching. Everyone seems to have to bring something new out, something, the next great product, isn't it? It's like, what can you do next? Because it's so, I think really over the last 5 years, and I've seen a lot of like, especially maybe it's just my own awareness of it. Seeing a lot of like ex-military, coaches, whether that be physical coaches, mindset coaching, that there is such a massive market. But what I like about the content that you do at The Natural Edge is you break everything down and go, right, this is this. But you've also admitted that your greatest discomfort in life is actually sitting in front of a camera or being in front of the camera. And you kind of go, because it was the same as myself when I've done podcasts and people saying you act like this and that, and it's like, you've never seen the anxiety going through my body 5 minutes before you press that record or before you go live. And like you said yourself, you could go and do your former job without thinking about it, but to stand in front of a camera, I know you've also obviously spoken about how long it's took to get to this place now, but the amount of times, like you said, you've kind of stumbled, picked yourself back up, gone on to the next one, that worked, that didn't work. Do you find that, to find that stability in life, do you find it such a rocky path? And because of those previous failures, you've built it stronger?
It comes back to identity. So the only reason, and having that, taking action that really aligns with your identity, that's when things become easy to take the action, even though it's uncomfortable. So doing social media and videos for The Natural Edge, it probably took 3 years to get comfortable with it. So it was really, really uncomfortable in the beginning because I hated drama at school. So I had an identity around, this is just not me. I don't like being in front of the camera, performing, etc. But because I believed in The Natural Edge and what we were doing, and I knew it was a necessary part of it, then that was the reason that I was able to still take that action, even though it was really uncomfortable, and make mistakes and fail and keep going. And so it comes down to, the stronger your alignment between your identity and the actions you want to take, the more discomfort and failures you will be you'll be able to take, essentially. When it's not that strong, you give up much, much sooner. So yeah, that's the common thing when you get through selection or doing harder courses in the military. It has to be something that you care about more than anything else. The more you care about, the more pain you'll put yourself through to achieve it. And that's when it becomes easy to take that action. If you try and do things and you've got this constant friction in life, there's some misalignment there. And you need to step back and ask yourself what that is, where it's coming from, and then really look at the path that you're walking on and perhaps make some changes.
Yeah, definitely. Because the other part to The Natural Edge I see, and a lot of people may see it the same as myself, you are the front man. You are the man that stands there. You're almost like that lead singer of the band. You're there in front. And I know you've got that good team behind you, a solid team. And I think that's something that people forget a lot. It's who you surround yourself with, and going on to like social media. It's like, who are you following? What are you following? Because you start off with this like clean canvas at first, and then, from that side. But for yourself there, that team is essential, isn't it? It's like, this is sometimes a lot of people forget that. It's a, who have you got around you, but are they good for you? What value are they put into your life? And I think it could probably be the same as yourself. It must be quite uncomfortable being obviously the front person in Natural Edge in that sense, but you've also got that great team behind you to back you up.
We didn't have a team for years.
No.
It was just John and I. And we just split it between. It works very well because I like writing content and John does all the technical side of things, which I'm terrible at. So it just naturally, we just split it up that way. So it happened that I was writing the content, so then I was filming the content and John does the tech stuff. And having someone else to go through, having support, same as in the military, even though a lot of the things you do test the individual, you don't get through any of those things without that mutual support of the people around you. And I found the same in business. It's been much easier going through it with somebody than trying to do it on your own. And then it's only in the sort of last year or so that we've brought people on board and brought that team. But you're right, when you bring that team on board, but especially when you're just a small business, and same in the military, working in small teams, it's really important that the people you do bring on board are the right people, because you only need one person to not really fit in to cause big friction across the wider team.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that's sometimes people forget. They go, "Oh, I'm doing this on my own. I'm struggling through this. I do that," and you become very like tunnel visioned in the way that you see things. But that's something that I've said myself. You know, especially with areas such as mental health, for example. You know, it's not just. Sometimes I do stop and I go, actually, how many people? Because you scroll through or you see something, and I use social media very much a lot because there's very much a big presence of it. But it's also coming back to about who you're surrounding yourself with, because everybody struggles with something. And I think this is what even the best of us forget this. Some days we kind of go, "Oh, I'm on a bad day. You know, this happened, this has happened, this happened." We've got to stop and go, "Hang on a minute." But so do how many other people did they go through those struggles? Did they do that? And we often forget this, don't we? We kind of go, "Oh man, really bad day." But then who else is probably, one of your best mates might be, this has happened to them, or that person so this has happened. And we often forget this. We become very tunnel vision, don't we? In that sense,
it's easy to think. I mean, it's a yes and no answer to that, because on the one hand, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter what other people are feeling. What is important to remember, though, is that you're not alone. It is the universal human condition. Everyone that I coach, they come in with the same issues, but it's easy to slip into thinking that you're the only one feeling like this, when, like you said, in reality, everyone feels like it. Everyone goes through bad days. Everyone worries about something. Everyone feels self-doubt or different. But it's just normal. It's a normal part of being a human being. But it is easy to forget that, especially with social media, where you are getting that ideal version, snapshots of everything. And so learning to sit with times when you don't feel good, which you're always going to have, and still be able to take the action that you need and move forwards. And again, it comes back to being able to step outside of your thoughts and emotions and not let them drive and dictate your actions the whole time. That's a really powerful skill to master, but it takes effort to get to that point where you can master it.
Definitely. Now, I'm going to ask you a question here. I'm going to break it into two parts for a very good reason. If I was to say to you, what's your greatest success to point, what would it be? Could you define that? Or would you say more, if we took it into a more relevance, what's your great success from the natural edge to date?
I was weighing up then when you asked it, whether it's the natural edge or whether it was what I achieved in the military. They're kind of entwined, perhaps, because obviously the natural edge would draw a lot upon that experience. I think probably the answer is the natural edge, creating something that was essentially in our heads. John and I had an idea in our heads, and now we have a physical office with a team of 6. We've created a job for ourselves. Essentially, we've made our own company and created a job, as opposed to, I guess, even in the military, you're going through a process that already exists, and it's been far harder than anything that I ever did in the military, because in the military, at least there are some very defined parameters. You go on this course for 6 months and you're either good enough or you're not. Whereas starting a business there's so many variables involved with it And it could be 2 years, it could be 20 years to find the success that you're looking for. And it just never ends. There's always constant challenges. So it's been really hard, but then also incredibly rewarding at the same time. So I think getting T&E to where it is now is probably the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you're going to know what this next question is. What's your greatest failure?
What is my greatest failure? That is a good question. I can't think of one at the top of my head, but and that's not, I'm not saying that I don't fail. I fail all the time, but I genuinely don't see things as failures. There's stuff that you regret and you mess up on, but it's just life. It's just experience. I don't ever look back and go, oh God, I've done like massive failure. That's defined. Like, it's just an experience that and it's almost the same with the successes. You know, I can say T&E, but in reality, there's so many different components that you could tie into that in different areas of life. So trying to think now, like greatest, I mean, there's all with this business, you know, it's tying it back. There's another good example, the amount of mistakes that John and I have made, you know, even up until a couple of months ago, which is why we were switching in the focus of the coaching. It's a glaring, huge error in our marketing angle that we should have, it's like day one, week one, day one basics of marketing. And it just took someone pointing it out to be like, oh yeah, Jesus, of course. It's like glaring hole in what we're doing. So, you know, you could say, oh, but it's all just a process. You have to go through it. And, you know, because we've had that glaring hole in the marketing we've been doing, actually, well, we've become really good at all these other things around it, which has enabled us to get to this point. So on the positive side, it's forced us to get amazing at other parts of marketing. And now when we fix this hole, hopefully it should then, you know, catapult it forward another level. So is it a failure? Well, yes, because we made this mistake, but then it also, you know, the opposite is the way. It forces us to make all these other changes or, you know, find success in different ways. And now that's just going to help us even more when we do fix this error. So there is, depending on, it all comes down to framing, doesn't it? It's how you frame it and choose to move forward from mistakes that do happen.
Yeah, definitely, because that's why I use the word greatest failure, because I don't believe this. I believe the same as you. I don't believe we have failures. And I think if it's great, there's lessons learned from it. If you can take something from that, that's happened. Okay, then, right, not a problem. You take that, and it's how you frame something. If I was to ask, you know, 5 or 10 people that same question, what would their answers be? Are they going to just completely focus on something negative? Or are they going to look at it the same way as you do? Oh, actually, I gained so much knowledge from that. You know, it wasn't, we've done that wrong. Okay, let's fix it, move on, and we'll move on. I think very much is exactly what you're saying there. It's about reframing your thoughts, isn't it? It's about looking at something, because you can ask so many people, how did they respond to that? And it's using like little small words such as greatest failure, because you could almost like laugh at that part and go, actually, I did this one time and then this happened. And I think it's the way that you open up the way that you view something, isn't it? And I think it's very much that if you can laugh about it in the shittest part of that time, you can overcome it, you know, and it's very much that smile in the face of adversity, or, you know, cheerfulness. You know, you can look at all these areas, but I think it's that person who looks at something and goes, okay, that didn't work well. How can I overcome it? How can I take that experience? What can I do better with it? It's always like having that debrief every day with yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that. That's it. I think the way that you phrase it, that debrief every day, is and creating that feedback loop for yourself is a really good way to frame it.
Yeah, because it's something that I kind of, for a long time, I kind of stopped every day and went, okay, then I knew what I was doing at the beginning of the day. I built the systems and going, okay, I'm going to get up this time, do meditation, do mindfulness, do my exercise, stretch, and this, that. But at the end of the night, I kind of was like, kind of, as we all do, sit down and we kind of go, oh, you have the phone in your hand. And you kind of go, you've got a choice then to go, right, I can sit and scroll through all these apps for the next 3 hours, or I can do something with it. So what I started doing was breaking it down. I asked myself 3 questions every single day. What went well, what didn't go well, and what could I do better? and exactly what you do in the military as well. So I took that, and every day I kind of went, well, that worked best. That didn't work well. What can I do to change this? And I think really people, if they take that, and I know that's something you do very much on that coaching, is like looking at those the strengths and weaknesses, isn't it? And saying, okay, you're good at this, but what aren't you getting right? And it's just completely working on that to strengthen it.
What you were talking about there is you've just been putting the reps in. You've been treating your
Yeah.
mindset in the same way that you treat physical training. And by having that daily practice, you've created a way, something that works for you to put the reps in. And that's what most people don't do. And it comes back to that not treating mindset like a skill set, which is really all that it is.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Now I'm going to take it on to something else. And this is something that I always found amusing, and you probably will see that relevance in it. Cold water therapy. Some people love it, some people hate it. And I know this is very much like been a big topic over the time, because I also want to just go on to the different side of life there. Obviously, we've talked about the coaching, and I know we'll come back onto that one. But with the areas such as, and some people have accused you of you sitting in hot water, why is there like, but to you, what's your greatest benefit that you've got from that, from doing the dips, from doing the cold water? Do you see that relevance there?
Cold water immersion, it's just a tool. People got wrapped up in all these things. Oh, you should meditate. Meditation's good or bad, or cold water's good or bad. It's just a tool. I think like the health benefits, people can debate that. Fine. If that does suggest there's some health benefits around it. That's not the reason I do it. To me, it's just a good tool for embracing discomfort. It's just a very simple way, in the same way that you would physical exercise. You could achieve the same doing the plank. It's a way to confront putting yourself into a physically uncomfortable situation, which forces you to confront your inner self-talk. And you can use that as a training tool to learn to sit with that discomfort and still take action even when you don't want to. And that then translates across into life. So that to me it's really doing something you don't want to do. So it's picking an activity, something that you don't want to do, and finding a way to sit with that discomfort and then do it. And that to me is where the real power with it is. And that's what I see, when I talk to people who do it, that seems to be the similar theme. And you obviously get that endorphin rush afterwards as well, which is great. So it's a good feeling for that. But to me, it's again, it comes back to, it's another way to put the reps in mentally. So it's training mindset through doing something physical. Yeah,
definitely. Because I think myself, and I see this a lot in you, everything you do, there's a purpose in what you do and why you do it. If you kind of like you're doing cold water therapy, you're doing obviously rope climbs as well, you've done this exercise or that exercise, or done something in that physical way, there's a purpose in everything. And I think it very much goes back to what you're saying. It's finding purpose in every single step and activity, what you do. And I think that's a very key skill, isn't it? To be so immersed in yourself that you're aware that, why am I doing this for? Do I really want to climb to the top of Petty Fan again? Do I really want to do this? But what I like about the way that you've framed everything is you do see a purpose in that. It's not just for the sake of doing it. There's a reason behind doing it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you have to be careful with that, because it can come across as people getting wrapped. Oh, everything has to have a result, which isn't the case. But then it does. It's kind of, you're right in the sense it does have a purpose, but the purpose can be, like, even if you're just doing something for the sake of it, i.e. the fun, well, kind of, if you link it back, then there's a purpose in that, because we know fun's good for us. Yeah. So it's sort of always is there, but I think it doesn't have to be. A lot of the time, the danger with it is people start treating everything like pass-fail tests and academic exercises, as opposed to really all any of us are looking for in life is just find happiness and fulfillment. And that looks different for every single person. So I think it's more about self-awareness. It's more about understanding yourself and why. It's more about asking why. Why are you saying yes to some things or no to others, and taking some actions or not taking other actions? So I think it's that at the heart of it's the self-awareness piece and getting to know yourself. And where that happiness and that satisfaction lies for you, and trying to walk a path that's going to give you more of that.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I know we've got like about 5 minutes left and it's gone so quick. We could sit here and just probably break everything down, all parts of life. But there's always like the one question I always like to ask everybody, and everyone's going to have their own take on this. But if you wanted to give one piece of advice to anybody in general, what would that be?
Treat mindset like a skill set. It's honestly the piece I see missing. Everyone passively consumes information around it, reading books, listening to podcasts, watching social media, but very few people have a way to translate that into practical steps that they can actually implement. There's thousands of training plans for the physical body out there, but very few practical step-by-step systems that allows you to put the reps in to, whether that's building more confidence, removing imposter syndrome, getting rid of anxiety, reducing stress, all of these components. There are skills that you can build that achieve all of those things. But the only way you do that, you've got to put the reps in, and it takes time. But if you are consistently putting them in, that's when people see changes. Like what we do isn't magic or rocket science, but we get life-changing results for people because we just have a step-by-step process, and people follow it and they get results because of that. In the same way that you could go to the gym and throw a few weights around ad hoc, or you could have a PT give you an 8-week plan where you know exactly what you're doing every single day. The result's going to be night and day. It's going to be a massive difference.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I appreciate your time here today, Si. I mean, we've kind of gone into some areas more than others, and I hope that obviously everybody gets we can kind of break this down the way they want to, because that's what this is all about. It's about seeking the truths. Really deep diving into some areas and going, okay, we can explore this a bit more. Some splinter off to others. I know a lot of people are going to get a lot from this. Especially some very common questions or common areas that a lot of people kind of think they've got the answer to. And I think you've answered, a lot there. But where can people find you online? I know you're quite, diverse now.
The easiest places are LinkedIn under my name, or The Natural Edge on Instagram, or the website. They're probably keep forgetting about YouTube, and the YouTube channel under The Natural Edge as well.
Brilliant. What I'll do as well, I'll be putting on the show notes anyway, all the various links for yourself, because I know some great content on there. But just want to say thank you very much for your time today. It's been absolutely fantastic chatting.
Cheers, Chris. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
No problem.